There are two types of people: those who make plans and those who execute them by building systems. Well, our guest today is one of the latter. Violetta Usanova calls the ability to turn chaos into measurable and scalable processes her superpower. She went from head of a business unit to operations director at major EdTech and FinTech companies, and today she consults for international startups. But what makes her story special? She isn't tied down to one place. Violetta is a digital nomad who combines deep expertise with a philosophy of freedom. And yes, she's also a rock climber and a mountaineer. Please welcome Violetta Usanova.
Hi, everyone.
I'm so glad you joined us on the Fly Me to the Moon podcast about startups, business, travel, and all that.
I love all of those things, so I'm happy to be here.
Usually we start with business, but today we'll start differently with the personal. And my first question, Violetta, you've gone from EdTech to your own consultancy while also studying for an MBA in Germany. Your profile is exactly why we invited you. It's about being global. In other words, you're a citizen of the world. But let's start with geography. Where did you last work? Like, where were you working from most recently?
I think from Thailand, from Laos, from so many different places, mostly from Asia. From Asia, I worked from the US. And all of this was for the same company in my last position as commercial director.
Have you ever counted how many countries you visited?
I've never actually counted, but I think it's definitely at least several dozen by now. Well, 25 plus, as they say in marketing companies, plus.
All right, fair enough.
And a lot can fit into that plus.
Got it. Let's talk about your digital nomadism. Often, for me personally, for instance, it started with the romance. I want to go to Bali. I want to work on my laptop from the beach. How did yours start? And what challenges have you faced with this kind of lifestyle?
It started spontaneously. Just at some point in time, I really liked one country. That was Thailand. Before that, I mostly just went away temporarily. And after the pandemic, of course, many rules changed and I had more opportunities to work from anywhere in the world. And then at one point, I went with friends and my husband to Thailand. And we stayed there not for 2 weeks as planned, but for 3 or 4 months. And then I realized that it's actually not scary at all. It's very interesting and very enriching. And at the same time, it often becomes very useful and effective for business as well.
The next question is about the bureaucratic side of this lifestyle. They say that being a digital nomad means going through bureaucratic hell. In reality, for those with powerful passports, it is typically speaking much less of an issue. For those with less powerful or average passports, it is often a significant barrier to fulfilling their desire for free movement and for working from wherever they want. So here's my question, or rather, a request. Tell me the craziest story you have about getting a visa.
There are a few stories. One is more, well, crazy than difficult because you didn't really have to apply for a visa as such. But what I liked most was the way of crossing the border. Well, again, from Thailand to Cambodia with a tour group when they stapled the visa into your passport. It was very interesting. I didn't know how my passport would be viewed afterwards, but it was an interesting, unique experience. And I still have that visa, of course. Although overall, it would be quite easy to just peel it off the passport. That's probably the story that surprised me the most regarding visas. But the most difficult story was about getting a visa for New Zealand. Strangely enough, as someone with a weak passport, it was the longest process. I had to list for the last 10 years all ports of entry, not just countries, but literally the airport or port you arrived at. And that was very hard to remember. Since then, by the way, a little tip, I now just keep a list of when, where, which ticket I used to arrive, and so on. It really simplifies many, many, many questions. Because for, well, most people from most countries in the world, this can become a problem because you simply don't remember, and it might be seen at the border as some desire to be sneaky somewhere, but no. So, and the visa was quite big. The application was huge. I had to show property rights, assets, write several essays on why I'm going with my husband and that our relationship is genuine, attach photos, write a statement that we intend to return before the visa expires. And on top of all that, it was expensive. Documents had to be translated into English, notarized, and in the end, we were rejected because the situation is such that you might not want to return and it's not subject to appeal. It was an interesting experience. Of course, it really upset me because I wanted to go to a friend's wedding, but unfortunately, I'm happy for him now.
From a distance.
From a distance, yes.
And what was the most pleasant visa experience?
It's hard to call the experience of getting a visa pleasant. You're laughing because you agree with that. Especially, it's a great challenge. Lately, when all countries aren't accepting people from other countries, closing up as much as possible. So, this pleasure is, of course, unpleasant. That's why I really love services and platforms that help overcome these difficulties, because sometimes it's, well, impossible to figure it out on your own. Or it's possible at such a cost that in the 2 days I'd spent studying this visa, I could have done something useful and earned money.
Thank you so much for the wonderful and thoughtful lead in, which I especially appreciate to what I wanted to say about our platform.
The subtle hint, yes, the platform is really great. Use it. I use it. I highly recommend it, especially for a first trip to an unexplored country.
Actually, Violetta is one of our platform's first users because we launched just recently. What is it all about, Visarun? AI is a service that helps automate getting, tracking, and storing visas in one place, which saves you a lot of time and stress, actually, because our visa specialists have vast expertise in visa matters and they know which requirements are currently relevant. We constantly update our database accordingly. Our goal is to simplify global travel as much as possible so that more people can see more countries and enjoy that experience. Register via the link in the description. Use the promo code podcast to get a 30% discount on your visa application until June 1st. All links are in the description or in the profile bio.
In the description. Be sure to check it out.
Yes, for the recommendation, by the way, we'll give something too.
Then I recommend it to everyone. I'm your most prominent referral. Wait for me.
I have a next question. It's also about travel. Now, you're a person who builds systems and you hate chaos, you love control, but actually, travel isn't always about control. There's very often a fairly high degree of uncertainty involved, like, for example, flight delays or lost luggage, for instance. What helps you stay productive and calm while traveling? Because I'm sure that not everything goes smoothly on every single trip of yours. God willing, of course, but
Sometimes
it happens.
more. Actually, that's a very cool question and relevant for many and for all of us. I don't dislike chaos, and I can't say that I love control. We can never defeat chaos. We can never control absolutely everything. And so much is completely out of our control, especially things like whether they'll let us in or not. But somehow we can reduce it. And as a very anxious, nervous, and constantly worrying person, I can't do without this control. It was actually more of a survival strategy, really. So, my weaker side, like poor prioritization, my inability to make decisions, and my fear of the unknown, eventually became my professional trait that now helps me manage all of this chaos in a way. Or rather, to worry a bit less about the fact that chaos exists. And what I want to say about systems, specifically regarding travel, here, maybe even in the form of a checklist. First is many things come with experience, and strangely enough, don't be afraid, try new things, fulfill dreams, because interacting with people from other cultures and seeing something new is always useful. It always develops you and helps you not to withdraw into yourself. So, step number one, don't be afraid. Use new services that help you optimize the visa process. But in reality, some things only become clear over time. For example, you travel and realize it's incredibly inconvenient to live without an HDMI cable to connect your laptop to the TV. And it seems like a small thing, but it helps boost your comfort level so much that, well, it becomes really great. From little things like a comfortable sleep mask to a folder where all your documents are kept, it really helps a lot during a trip. And with some things, you already know what to look out for. But for that, it's very important for all of us to always really, analyze what's happening around us and not to get closed off in it. I mean, look around, understand why I'm uncomfortable right now and what I could do to make this trip more comfortable for me. And so maybe this kind of slightly investigative system, it helps. Actually, it's very important. You can't just instill some system. You can only live through it and become native, close to that system. It will be natural and organic. And so I think step number one is observing where you're uncomfortable and how to make it more comfortable. Second is not being afraid to ask for help. Well, I won't advertise the services so aggressively here, although it's really a very cool thing. Don't be afraid to ask for help. Ask a border guard. Can I do this? Where do I go? What do I do here? Ask at the visa center. Is there any way I can change this application? Or ask, well, just any person who seems more or less pleasant to you. Whenever I go somewhere I learned the phrase, please help me in the language of that country. And it always sounds a bit accented and funny. And so the chaos that happens and occurs, well, you have to observe it. Some things are better to anticipate. It's just attention to detail to what's happening. If you're flying somewhere, you can check the route. Whether you can go out there or not, study the airline's rules. Most often it's very labor intensive. So I'm saying that without, some help, it's quite difficult to do. But when you start traveling, you see patterns, you already understand where to go, how, say, transfer differs from exit, the way out. And if you see the baggage carousel, it's better not to go any further because the connection definitely won't happen. I think it's also very important to consider cultural specifics here because what's allowed, for example, in, say, Denmark, isn't allowed in China. So that's why managing chaos, if I'm to answer the question directly, is through concepts of anti fragility, through observation, through noticing existing patterns, and through deep attention to yourself and what's happening. I guess that's how important it is.
Tell me, please, you mentioned that there are some items or rituals that significantly improve your emotional state. I mean, not yours personally, but a person's in general in some unusual situation. So, in your case, what kind of item or ritual is it?
I think it's very important to take care of your personal comfort everywhere. So, a sleep mask and earplugs are always a good solution. Warm socks, because a warm sweater or scarf, some kind of wrap, because it's always cold in airports. But that's just talking about the travel part. But it's very important what I, for example, always take with me when I'm going away for a long term, like 6 months plus, it all fits into one suitcase. First of all, it's very important. I always take the most necessary things with me. If there are any medications I can't do without, my laptop, some important notes, that's all in my carry on, and the minimal comfort kit, naturally, in case something vital doesn't arrive. Well, for example, like medications, if there are any specific ones. Second, this is for the home, what I take. I always take a vegetable peeler because, well, yeah, it's a thing. I always take a coffee filter that you can set up, a little bag, and there'll always be decent coffee. A tea infuser, an HDMI cable to connect my laptop and watch series on the TV. But mostly, it's very important to me how I eat, how I sleep, and just how comfortable I am. So it's mainly things that help me in the kitchen. Like if I know there's no chamomile tea somewhere, I bring kilograms of chamomile with me. And I just try not to attract attention at the border with extra questions about the chamomile.
For traveling, I have basically all the same things you mentioned, only also compression stockings.
Compression stockings are important. Ladies, take note, homemakers.
And men too,
By the way, varicose veins are a real thing.
it's actually really one of those things that truly makes long flights easier. I mean, if you're flying any flight that lasts more than 5 hours, I'd recommend wearing them for everyone.
Yes, absolutely. Even for a couple of hours, because when you're sitting, it's all uncomfortable. The altitude changes.
I just had very vivid memories of when I flew to America. The flight over there was about 8 hours, and I took my shoes off during the flight and then I couldn't get them back on.
Wow, that's just great.
Just really great.
In a bad way, I mean. That's actually a big deal, an important point.
Well, since then, I always put on compression stockings because, well, it's really my comfort. It's my health. I'd rather spend 5 minutes on it. Yeah, people will look at me like an idiot, but so what?
No one's going to look at you like an idiot.
But at the same time, I get really stressed if I forget my travel pillow because I'm very concerned about my back. The neck is always part of the back, and it gets very unpleasant if I suddenly realize I've forgotten it because it means my neck will likely be aching. I have this silly habit. I get on a plane, no matter how long the flight is, I sit down 10 seconds and I'm out. The nomad philosophy. There's this opinion that it often leads to some kind of superficial connections just because you don't stay long enough in any one place where you want to create or build something meaningful. I really dislike this word because I have issues with it, especially when it comes to true intimacy with people. So basically, you can't really build strong, deep friendships or anything like that. How do you deal with loneliness and how do you find your people with the kind of lifestyle that you lead?
Well, I think that for everyone, these are pretty common points. I mean, regardless of moving, regardless of flights, you know right now that a wave of loneliness is just sweeping across the world.
Yeah.
And It's generally hard for people to get close to anyone,
Yeah.
called epidemic, and you can live in the very same city
Yeah.
and be absolutely lonely. So, step probably number one, as we both know, it's important to work with a therapist, be mindful of yourself, realize what's actually going on, who I need, why I need them, why this kind of person. And second, there are networking rules. There are many very interesting books on networking. I'll just mention Networking for Spies. It's about Russian spies who were in the United States and how they built connections. A very interesting book. But I'll probably mention a few points now about how first you have to establish that connection at all. So if you don't talk to people, then it won't be established. So you have to try to communicate, go out, but not in some forced and unnatural way. For example, I think people are united by a common cause, activity, a common thought. And so the coolest moments where my friends have come from in recent years, for example, is we either worked together on some project or we studied together in the same course or we met over some topic. I have a lot of friends scattered around the world. They're rock climbers who travel all over the world and whom we run into in many countries because the spots, well, popular places, climbing spots, they're roughly the same. And it's very nice. And I think that if the first 2 points are, well, actually trying to talk to people at all, the second is finding your people through some common interests that are close to you. They're everywhere. Most often you can sign up, I don't know, for a gym anywhere and go for one day. Or, for example, sign up for some drawing course and find people there who, through this activity, experience the same thing as you. Shared experience, it unites. And the third point is that the connection needs to be maintained. Any relationship requires work. So even a small message, just asking someone, how are you doing? Like you once told me about just sending a reel. It shows I'm thinking of you, that I want to stay in touch. And right now, for instance, I have the energy for a reel, so I'll send it. So I'm happy to do things like that. I might just write, how's it going? And gradually, obviously, you can't stay close with everyone, but over time, some people stay. And if you return to certain places and everyone has them, I mean, it's not like I just go to random places. There's likely either a great community there or something else. I can message people who've been there to ask for advice. I think that this kind of maintenance in small bits, at some point you just become closer with someone, you talk more, and at some point, this broader connection becomes something more intimate.
You said that there's a strictly defined set of climbing spots. Tell us about them.
About the set of spots.
Give us a whole list. Well, I just thought, what if someone gets interested in climbing and we provide some content right away?
All right. Well, I think a real must have for climbing is, without a doubt, Krabi, Thailand.
1,000,000 out of 10.
Second is Turkey, Geyik Bayırı. Turkey has a lot of spots in general, but Geyik Bayırı is the Mecca everyone goes to. It's near Antalya. Actually, there are many more spots. All of Europe, many legendary climbing routes almost everywhere. Germany, Spain, Italy, France. In northern countries like Canada, it's mostly mountain routes, mountaineering, not exactly rock climbing, but it's great. In India, for example, bouldering is more developed, but it's also very cool. I'd love to go to Australia for bouldering. In Mexico, for instance, or Argentina, there are also very long, massive, beautiful routes. Basically, I think climbing is everywhere, wherever you look. But among the best are Thailand and Turkey, Europe.
Actually, what I wanted to link this to is that I immediately have this counter where it's easy to get a visa and where it's hard. Well, for example, with a strong passport, you can go to all these places. If the passport is a bit weaker, then it turns out to be a bit harder. That's Europe, Canada. That's actually incredibly difficult. Anyway, let's leave that aside.
Really?
Well, it takes a very long time. They keep your passport for a very long time. They state right on their website for people with weak passports that they can, I think, take up to 2 years. I'll double check that, but I think they can keep your passport at the embassy for up to 2 years.
Well, I know of cases taking 4 months, but yeah, 2 years is probably possible. And how do you manage 2 years without a passport?
Well, maybe I'm mistaken somewhere, or perhaps I made an error in my thinking.
That's why, kids, you always need a consultant.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know that in the United States, there's a very large rock climbing community.
Yeah.
And accordingly, all of South America, it's practically all open. Come on over, be a tourist, be a welcome guest. It's really open there for any passport.
Yeah. But there are always cultural nuances. For example, and this is also about probably not even about visas, but about some aspect of travel. The fact that you have to be very open-minded, and respectful of different cultures and take into account the features you might encounter. For example, there are countries that were originally very closed off for a long time. For example, Japan is like that. They value their internal culture very much. And it was probably so difficult to go there specifically for climbing because there's no publicly available information about the areas. And usually it's solved this way. I just write to someone in the community and ask, guys, where can I look? There are climbing guidebooks for many places, but in Japan, everything was in Japanese. And that was, to put it mildly, difficult. So the community, the guys who've been there, really helps and gives at least some hints.
Yeah, sharing experiences is indeed very important. There are a bunch of chats I know that are specifically focused on different aspects. For example, if you're a fan of language and history and you want to see, like I do, and you want to see certain things, then accordingly, some things won't be in regular guidebooks either. You'll have to look for them
I agree.
or ask someone from specialized chats to share at least a map, something like that. The last question in the block about travel and digital nomadism. Is there a place that you call home? Or is your home really just a laptop with internet and that's actually it?
The location doesn't matter to me. The place doesn't matter. Actually, the place and the atmosphere are important. There shouldn't be any visual noise around. It should be a pleasant, comfortable place, a good internet connection. That's important, but that's the setting. And as for where home is, well, I'm going to say something very cheesy, a totally rosy thing, but home is where your loved ones are. For me now, wherever I go with my husband, I have a home there. It just forms. If there are friends there, that's even better. It's like a real home. So after all, no matter how much I talk about business, home is more of a feeling. And I don't know, even if the husband option wasn't there right now, I think I'd team up with some close girlfriend and we'd fly off into the sunset.
To Goa, like I suggested today.
Yeah, yeah. Instead of the podcast, Dasha writes, there are tickets to Goa tonight. Let's go. But she has a dog, she can't. Well, you have to admit, it's boring to go alone. Not exactly boring, but it can often be difficult. It can be tough the first time experiencing certain moments. Then I feel like when there's two of you, it always turns into a bigger adventure. Like when you're, I don't know, Frodo with friends going to throw the ring into Mordor instead of Xena, warrior princess, trekking through the mountains alone with a sword. It's nice having someone close, someone you can talk to,
Yeah, I agree.
share things, a friend to travel with, or maybe someone's waiting for you,
Yes, I agree.
someone you trust.
I completely agree with everything that has been said so far, except for, well, the assessment, let's say. I think they're just different kinds of experiences,
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
right? If you go with a loved one, that's one type of trip. You'll have certain activities.
Yeah. And different needs.
Yeah. And the vibe will be different and you'll do things that you both enjoy. If you go
You're right. You're right.
with a group of girlfriends, you'll do something different. Your activities will be different.
Go alone and you'll do something else entirely.
Yes, exactly. I mean,
I think it's actually very important to travel alone. And once a year, I make it a goal to travel somewhere on my own and have that experience.
where was the last place you went alone?
To Japan last year for almost a month, maybe a month and a half.
Let's change the subject then and talk about business, international markets, and cross cultural communication. Because given everything you've already said, it seems that your character and your openness to the world have naturally led you straight toward pursuing a global career rather than just a local one. I believe, and many people actually agree, that a global career is built a bit differently than a local one. And these are truly two different types of professional self realization. So here's my question. You've launched products in the United States, Europe, and the list goes on. Name one business decision that worked great in Russia but failed miserably in an international market, or one of them, due to cultural differences. You're smiling like that. You already have an answer.
I just thought you were going to say, tell me about one solution that works for all markets. And I already had my answer ready, not a single one. But
Well, we'd like that, of course, but no. It's like that make it pretty button in content creation. There's just no such button.
pity.
Pity. Tell me, please, what did that experience teach you? Because we know our experience is made of conclusions and the mistakes those conclusions are based on. So please, I'm listening.
Well, I don't really want to talk about mistakes specifically because whenever you face something new and unknown, it's always trial and error. You experiment, you make strategic bets based on what you've studied, what you understand, and what you've asked around about. Those bets either pay off or they don't. And very often they don't, unfortunately. The world is just so unique and complex. But I'd like to talk not about business, but rather about a personal experience about my MBA. I'm doing an Impact MBA. It's at a German university. We mostly work online. My focus there is business, sustainability, ESG, and technology. It's all very interesting, and we meet regularly with groups, talk, and work on things together. And I've basically sworn off joking because translated jokes are, well, it's just impossible. I was actually asked not to joke.
They actually asked you?
Well, they hinted at it, yes. They said, I don't understand this, and I think it's unnecessary. I was like, I'm sorry.
That's interesting.
In general, it's actually very hard to be yourself when communicating with someone completely different. You always want to understand and make sense of it, but it's difficult, a different mentality. There's this whole book called The Culture Map. Many people have read it. I'll just remind you there are different scales, I think 6 or 10 of them, about how people perceive time, how they perceive friendship, intimacy, openness, and how they perceive the distance or closeness of leadership. And they set all these scales. Well, for example, I remember this meme about what a German mess is, where all the paper clips are straight and just one is tilted, right? And everyone's is different. For instance, in some high context cultures like China, you can't say many things, well, super directly. You have to be indirect. You have to very politely ask 10 times about family, relatives, and so on, and just hint at things. So being direct would be considered rude and
An insult.
an insult, yes. Right. You, as someone who deals with language and culture, you know this. And it's very hard sometimes. I always feel like I'm deceiving people because in my native language, in my native culture, I feel like this. And I would say this or I would do that. And with other cultures, I just meet when it's some universal format, but I'm always listening and sensing. Some perceive work differently. Some perceive a meeting at 12 o'clock differently. Some cultures will arrive a half an hour early, like Japan, for example, will arrive half an hour early. And if you're not the first one there, even an hour early, you're late. It's impolite. But for example, with all love and respect to the folks from Latin America, they're more flexible with this schedule. Brazil, the main thing is we agreed to meet. We agreed to meet, and everything will definitely work out. And sometimes it's hard with that.
Yeah, by the way, as you were telling that, I remembered a story about when I worked with a Mexican team and we were just starting to work together. We had a call. Some girls come to me and say, look, here's a list of hypotheses. We want to test these then, and those in a week. And I look at it and say, don't go. Let's decide right now. I look through it, realizing that even if something doesn't work out, it's not a big deal. At least we started something and maybe something will even take off. And I say, yes, that's it. Let's do it. Great plan. Go ahead. They didn't understand. They were like, what do you mean you just said yes like that? And I'm like, yes,
Looking for subtext.
go ahead. Go.
Were they looking for subtext?
They weren't used to it. For example, I don't know, by the way, if you've encountered this or not, but for instance, the older generation in our culture has this thing where you have to refuse 3 times, and on the fourth, you accept the offer. But here, from what I gathered, they're used to you having to show that you, as a manager, are considering it, really thinking long and hard about their proposal.
So it's like a respect for status that you have to review it very carefully.
Yes.
That then it's respect for their work.
Yeah, like I guess I didn't really show enough respect for their work at first, but then I talked to them about it later on because they actually brought it up to me and they said, we didn't get that move. I say, well, I trust you as professionals. I'm confident in you. Why would I slow down the process? They're like, oh, you're so smart. I couldn't tell if they were joking or not, but overall, our results were good.
Well, yeah. And humor, of course, is really hard to fully grasp and understand across cultures, as you might expect.
Well, that's why I study memes.
Yes, everyone has a different context.
Do you know, for example, what this means?
Well, I can guess it's something related to a broken heart, but that's definitely not it.
No, that's not it. Anyway, in Mexico, there was a president, Enrique Peña Nieto. And once he wanted to show he was on the same wavelength as millennials and tried to make a heart. He didn't succeed. And we constantly, well, the girls taught me accordingly, and we constantly to each other. If we don't understand something and are like, ta, then we're like, Peña Nieto. So yeah, I think really in intercultural communication, especially if you want to achieve something, to have a result, it's important to immerse yourself in the context and culture of the other side. Well, second, third, and so on. I think you, as someone studying for an MBA, where there are just a million different cultures together with you in one group and in neighboring ones, you've already felt this perfectly for yourself. I wanted to talk about two different fields in which you've managed to accumulate a sufficient amount of experience. That's EdTech and FinTech. For those who are far from any techs, like me, for example, I was in EdTech, now I'm in travel tech. What is that even? These are technologies that are related to a specific field. So, for example, travel tech is technology related to travel that does something within that field. EdTech is educational technology, accordingly. It's about online education, not just online, by the way, in general. Why only online? Well, not only. And fintech, accordingly, is about financial technologies. It's about payments, storage, investments, and there's actually a lot there. So you worked in both fields, fintech, edtech. In edtech, the client actually pays now for their future knowledge. That is, for the fact that in the future they will have a chance to improve their life through some new knowledge that they will acquire thanks to the service, the teacher, whatever it may be. In fintech, it often concerns the here and now. That is, some payments, for example, international ones, which are quite difficult to perform in the old system, but with the development of new technologies, it's becoming easier and easier. It's actually cool. How does your approach to unit economics and customer retention change depending on whether, say, you're selling a course or a financial service?
I'll tell you about unit economics. I wouldn't say that it relates specifically to any one field. Naturally, there are nuances, but there are rather models like transactional models or SaaS service delivery models, subscription models, which have certain patterns and certain templates. And depending on the industry, within these patterns and templates, we can say that some reference, some figure, some benchmark is a good result. So I think it's clear that domain expertise and expertise in finance, education, medicine, whatever, in any tech, it's very important. But I, due to my personal background and my education, as well as my particular line of work, always tend to root for the basics. That is because basic knowledge, the foundation, is most often essentially the same. It's understanding how business models work, understanding what unit economics is in general, how it's calculated, what it means for a business to be profitable, and what it means for unit economics to work out, and how to manage it. So I think it probably doesn't depend on technology, but rather on the realization of what the final product is, what the price is, what the value is, and how funnels work.
And is there some kind of preference among different cultures for the models you're talking about?
There is. Cultures definitely have differences. For example, I'll give the main example that you'll all recognize. This is an example, again, from high context cultures like China and, for example, European cultures, Denmark with a lower context, or the US. Pay attention to the interfaces you use. If you've ever been to China, Japan, or seen movies, watched anime, whatever, we always see advertising, lots and lots and lots of information, lots of offers, lots of choice, and bright neon signs, and everything is so bright, pay attention, and so on. Many people there notice that it turns out to be such a choice. You're given a choice, you can look at everything. That's how reading is organized there, and culture and context, that a person looks at everything, reads something. But for European cultures, this is visual noise that's hard to read. And most often we see online interfaces where there are three options: cheap, expensive, and mid optimal, with some hints, because it's hard for us to process so much context. And we even see information differently. Of course, this significantly changes how our offer will look in different markets. I can't say I'm an expert on all cultures, but I know for a fact that you can't the same creatives make for different countries, for different cultures. Besides the creatives being different, they'll also be on different platforms. That is, something is blocked somewhere, there are local alternatives somewhere, someone perceives information better on banners, some product is better advertised in the physical world because the audience is more likely to see it there. So, of course, there is definitely a difference between cultures. Well, the clearest example is, of course, advertising, how it looks and how we perceive it. For instance, even on TikTok, not TikTok, but Chinese video services, if you've noticed, comments appear in the background. Comments and subtitles pop up because they're high context. You need a lot of context. If there's little context, you either feel pressured or like something's being hidden from you. It's unfair. It's just not right.
It raises suspicion.
It raises suspicion. You've worked with international markets yourself and are well aware of how the Arab world differs, for instance, say from Mexico and vice versa.
For example, ad creatives in the Gulf might seem messy to someone from, say, Norway, an advertising specialist. Not messy in a moral sense, but rather that the design isn't polished to perfection, for instance.
Right?
But that doesn't matter. What matters is fitting as much information as possible onto one fairly small banner. So you have, say, 1920 by 1080 pixels, and you need to convey an offer, what you want to sell, invite people to, and so on. At the same time, you have to somehow evoke an emotion just to get the person to look at it. But then again, yes, in Norway, Germany, Denmark, or Sweden, it'll be a fairly minimalist design that grabs attention precisely by having very few elements that seem to float in the air, meaning lots of white space and short words. By the way, that's very important. Vertical,
Content.
yes, the English language uses short words.
But Thai, for example, or Arabic script, you can't separate them at all. You can't tell where anything's.
Goes.
Yes. Well, it's hard for us because the patterns themselves are just different.
Clearly, we see a difference in how information is conveyed in alphabetic languages versus syllabic or logographic ones. These are completely different worlds operating by different rules, and it turns out the brain even functions differently. This really must be considered not just in advertising, but in building a strategy for how you will interact with potential clients.
100%.
You specialize in human centricity, ESG, and AI. Many people now see ESG, which is about the environment, as just a checkbox for a trendy movement. Like, it's fashionable to care about the environment right now. Indeed, some people don't believe it's a human duty to care for the environment, but rather that people are just playing along, especially companies. As a strategist, tell me, how do you turn sustainable development from an expense into a growth driver in the international market? Do you have any?
Yes, I do. And I'll answer as an operations strategist here because there are different ways to look at these aspects, at this question. And as for strategy, ESG isn't just about the environment, it's also about social responsibility and the social responsibility of people and the state and about human rights. It's an important topic. And from a strategic standpoint, I believe that ESG is the strategy itself. It's a long term strategy, a strategy you can't touch, you can't feel it in the moment, but it's what leads us towards sustainability. And I'm like, I prefer the word sustainability as in resilience, the resilience of systems. And what do I like about this? A company can't be viewed in a vacuum. It lives, it's physically located in the world. And very often, when I talk about ESG, I think of a line from an Aurora song. You cannot eat money, you physically cannot eat money. So, a business that thinks about ESG, there are socially responsible businesses, and I'll talk about them now. It thinks 10 steps ahead. It's a business that believes it will still be around in 10, 15, or even 100 years. Only those kinds of businesses think about this. And I feel that this is to some extent a level of planning, a level of strategy. And from the very beginning, it's very important that the people joining the teams also share these values. And this is, of course, a strategic bet. It's not felt in the moment, but in the moment, it also allows the business to survive in the sense that compliance with certain norms and rules allows it to exist within a specific legal framework. Second, people want to work in sustainable, responsible businesses. The new generation, the greenials and zoomers, for whom we know these trends are very important, about a responsible attitude toward nature, about time management, about how the value system is built. And that's important. So, to sum it up completely, why is this important? Because we're simply thinking several steps ahead and trying to manage that. And actually, companies that ignore ESG standards altogether, I mean, there are many companies that lobby for, say, oil production. We all know this perfectly well. They are stalling development. It's just that simple. The more we want to sell oil, the less we invest in developing and implementing new energy sources. And so this issue always affects absolutely everyone. people, companies, and of course, those who hold more power and more responsibility. And it's difficult. But if you don't consider how the world is changing, where it's going, the finiteness of resources, the finiteness of human resources, all the changes, then a company won't last long. And people who build businesses for the long haul, I think they always take this into account. Even if they don't talk about it, they always consider it at the very least. And that's why I prefer the concept of sustainability with ESG as one of the parameters.
You mentioned the lobbying of oil interests, and it immediately reminded me why the US rail system is so poorly developed. I mean, in terms of total length, it's actually quite a lot, but compared to Europe, it's nothing. And it turns out that's because the aviation industry lobbied for airport development, so all the money and investment was shifted toward airports. Well, relatively speaking, I'm oversimplifying here,
Yes, sure.
but overall, that's what happened. Rail transport was seen as a thing of the past. They started investing more in airports, which is why such a dense network of airports emerged. But now it's coming back to haunt them.
Yes.
You help founders step away from day to day operations. For instance, if a founder finds your LinkedIn, link in the description, by the way, and says, Violetta, everything's on fire, nothing's working, margins are dying, the team won't listen, and everyone's leaving. What 3 steps would you suggest to them, regardless of the specific business?
First, about the core meaning, and I'll repeat the phrase. If a leader can't step away from the business, they aren't a leader, they're a hostage to it. And I think that within the context of our travel theme, this is also very important. I mean, why am I able to just pick up and go somewhere? Because I built the system in such a way that it won't fall apart if I'm not there. And very often, the businesses I've stepped away from continue to live and function. And that is my achievement. Not that I became indispensable, but that I built a system so that it thrives, it improves on its own, and it works. I think that's exactly the kind of sustainability that I believe in so much. And that's why building systems is precisely a good thing. It's about freedom, about building it so you're free to decide whether you stay or not. For example, many leaders won't close a business for a long time because they worry about their employees. How can I leave them? And so on.
Mm-hmm.
But that's also a trap.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I can probably give my top 3 tips, though every business obviously has its own nuances. First, take a look at who exactly you're working with, who these people are, and if they share your values. Because if you're thinking about this as a leader, it's likely important to you and you see a systemic issue. But there are people who aren't ready to delegate or let go because their own sense of value is so tied to it. Some idea of their own that I'm great, I'm indispensable, and you can't just delegate. You have to hand over areas of responsibility. The question isn't who makes the decisions. The question is how they're made, if they're autonomous enough. And the more autonomous a system is, strange as it sounds, the more independent and resilient it is, the more stable the business. So, for example, say you've built a very vertical system, a very vertical hierarchy. For instance, if the marketing department somehow breaks down, then everything fails because leads just don't come in and it doesn't work. But at the same time, you have a strong autonomous sales team. In my experience, a sales team can adapt and for a while cover that whole lead generation issue. The same way marketing can switch gears too.
Yes.
And it's not about isolation, it's about autonomy. And that kind of autonomy, it depends very heavily on people, how these people work, how they make decisions, how much those decisions can be trusted. It's about expertise, of course, and just general boldness and autonomy. I mean, autonomy and isolation are 2 different things. So I guess point number 1 is people. Point number 2, stemming from people, is the organizational structure that supports and maintains this system. And point number 3, well, probably a strong product market fit, a strong idea to unite these people and to really look at whether we're doing something useful, if we're moving in the right direction, in the right format that we want to do it in. Well, that's a bit vague. I'll probably change my answer now. First, of course, is people. Second is strategy and mission. So many people ignore this fact and just want to make money right away. But it seems like it's not much time to disconnect for a week, sit down and write out, think through the strategy, the meaning, the mission, the direction we're actually heading. This often answers a ton of questions about what we should and shouldn't be doing.
I agree.
I mean, if the strategy is just making money for money's sake, then I don't know, you could go sell bilyashi. For our foreign viewers, bilyashi are meat pies.
Another variation.
Another variation of pies.
Samsa.
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 Everyone knows samsa.
Yes,
So people strategy, thinking about what, how, and why we're doing it at all. Actually, that's probably step number one. To what end?
that's my absolute favorite question at any product meetup. We're doing this to what end?
Yes. And third, I guess, yes, it's about some kind of distributed decision making system supported by structure, trust, and communication. And the main advice is reach out to me. I'll help everyone. A very popular trend now is the fractional chief operating officer.
By the way, yes, that's really true. Final question. If you had the chance to be heard by every entrepreneur, startup founder, or person involved in business in general, what would you say to them?
Help me. Yeah, I'm a startup or two. Hang in there, guys. I'm with you. It's not easy, but it's cool and fun.
Well, it is fun, yeah?
Interesting. The idea, I guess, is that at some point you become an entrepreneur because you don't fit in anywhere, because you have your own very clear vision. You want to do something and you don't fit into some pre prepared boxes for you, and you start making your own path. And so I want to tell these people that, well, you're great. I respect you a lot. And even if things are hard sometimes, we'll get through it together.
Yes, and on this truly wonderful note, which is honestly very hopeful, I think we'll probably go ahead and wrap it up now. Thank you so much for being with us today and sharing your experience and expertise. It's very valuable.
Thank you. Visarun,
Yes. And I'm reminding you that we have
the promo code.
promo code podcast for a 30% discount on visas that you'll get before June 1st using our platform. Link in the description and in the profile description. Bye, everyone.